Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ba'd. So we're going to be covering the first Umayyad era. So I'll explain what the Umayyad era is as we go along. Basically, I've split up the Umayyad era into two parts. One of them is a part of, there's general peace and there's general security, and then things go downhill from there. And the second Umayyad era is when things pick up again. So there's some strife and then things pick up again. So some scholars have separated the eras and some scholars have not. So I just did it. I just separated the era only because there's no way we could cover the entire Umayyad era in one class. So I would have liked to do that, but it's not possible. So we're going to be speeding a little bit through some of these notes because we're still in the 1st century. And we only have a few classes left and we have another 13 centuries to cover. So let's try and move a little bit faster, inshallah. So please bear with me and listen very closely. So Muawiyah actually, according to Ibn Khaldun, he ruled for 20 years. He actually deserves to be put in the category of Al-Khulafa Rashidun. So Khulafa Rashidun, what are known as the rightly guided Caliphs or Khalifas, he should have been in the category with them. Usually we refer to them as 4, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali. Technically, Hassan is in the category as well because he was Khalifa for a period of time. So he should also be in that category, but oftentimes he's not grouped in that category because he only ruled for a very short period of time. Muawiyah should also be in that category, according to Ibn Khaldun and many scholars, for the fact that he was a pretty just person and he was a companion of the Prophet himself. The reason why he's not grouped among them is for 2 reasons. Number 1 is because he was the first Khalifa to assume authority through contest. Contest meaning there was a dispute about him. So there was the first time that 2 people had actually declared, someone declared himself Khalifa during a time where there was already another person claiming to be a Khalifa. So that's one reason why they didn't put him in the same category. The second reason is that he established the dynastic order of appointing his son to be the leader, and this started continuing afterwards. The reason why he's grouped separately is not because of his action itself, but because when you study the dynasty, what's called the Umayyad period or the Umayyad dynasty as a family of rulers, it's usually easier to study it that way. That's one way of classifying history. Personally, I wanted to classify history through centuries or through half centuries and take it through there rather than relying on the leadership. 2 problems I encountered. Problem number 1 is no one else has done it and it's just too much work and I've not been able to achieve that. Number 2 is that leaders, as we're going to see in the next class actually and in this class, leaders, whether you want to view history through them or through the common people, the leaders' decisions have major impacts on history. So studying it through the lens of who's the leader really determines a lot of policy in terms of what takes place during that time. That's one of the reasons why it's more difficult to study in that way, and it's always studied through the leaders. It's not that the whole world revolved around the leaders, but the leaders did make major decisions which impacted people's lives. So that's the reason. So let's take a look at a little bit background. The background is Muawiyah is from a clan known as the Banu Umayyah, okay, the Umayyad clan. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, is from the Hashim clan, the Banu Hashim. And there were several other clans among the tribe of Quraysh, right, as we've studied in the Life of the Prophet class. There's tribes and then there's smaller clans within a tribe. So they're all from Quraysh, but they're from different clans. So what happened was, in the past, there used to be a rivalry between the Banu Umayyah clan, between the Banu Hashim, and between other clans as well. There was a rivalry going on. And what happened was, during the time of Uthman, because he was a very soft person, the Umayyad family got the opportunity to, some of them got the opportunity to bring these old rivalries back and started this competition between clans again. And they started taking some of that power. Not that Uthman was guilty of it, but that many people around him, part of his family members, probably new Muslims or people who had accepted Islam later, they saw an opportunity. Because Uthman is not so tough, Umar was very tough, so his family would not get any, they didn't have any leeway to do anything. So Uthman, some of his family members, they utilized this opportunity. Under Muawiyah, it got even worse. Not because Muawiyah was soft, but because Muawiyah was more open to this idea because he felt that it would be better for the unity of the Muslims. So we have to keep that in mind. There's been this rivalry, and this rivalry or this competition mentality of the Umayyads is going to manifest itself across an entire century. So it's something you have to realize. It used to exist in the past, and it's being brought back through some people who are missing the point of Islam, that Islam was supposed to remove these barriers, right? It removed these tribal influences, but they did start coming back to an extent. Sometimes they came back to a greater extent, sometimes they came back to a lesser extent. All right? And sometimes one fluke of history, a good fluke, where it was completely eliminated. So we're gonna study that as well. So there's been a rivalry, and this influence was exploited. But if you look at it from the other perspective, right? How did the Prophet, peace be upon him, deal with the Umayyad clan? The Banu Umayyah were among the last people to accept Islam in the lifetime of the Prophet, peace be upon him. They were among the last, among the last influential tribes. And they were a very powerful tribe as well. How did the Prophet, peace be upon him, deal with them? The fact that they were new Muslims, the fact that they were a very powerful tribe, and the fact that they were a tribe who were very inclined towards power. Right? He used to deal with them in a very soft way as well. Right? So to say that dealing with them harshly is the best way to go, this is not what the Prophet, peace upon him, did. So he used to give them extra money from the spoils of war. And people had complained about that, but he was giving it to the Umayyad clan to soften their hearts. He gave them positions of authority. Even though they may not have been 100% most deserving of that, he did give them some special authority as well, because that would soften up their hearts, and they did have political, clout, and they did have political skills as well. So he used to do that, and he gave them a little bit extra attention and all of that. He also had married Habiba. Habiba was from the Umayyad clan, and she was Abu Sufyan's daughter. So keep in mind, Abu Sufyan, who we've already studied his life in the previous class, very important figure. The Prophet, peace be upon him, married his daughter already, Habiba. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, had relations, direct family relations with the Umayyad clan as well. So this is it kind of helps you balance it out, because if you look at it only from the perspective of these Umayyads, they just usurped power and they thought that they were doing everything. Well, on the other side, how did the Prophet, peace upon him, used to deal with them? So there are some faults, but then there's some balance that we need to bring back before we start going and just leveling all of this blame on them. So it's important to keep those things in mind. So who is Muawiyah? Muawiyah is the son of Abu Sufyan. Okay, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. He was known for his wisdom, and he was known for his good management. He was a person he was a very wise person. And he was very patient. Patient not meaning soft. Patient meaning he had political skills. So when somebody starts disputing, arguing, fighting, he doesn't start getting rash and getting emotional. He was very calm. And he knew how to, calm this person down, calm that person down. So he had very good administrative skills. And that's why he was kept in the position of governorship in Syria for such a long time. And that's why actually Syria was one of the places where the rebels could not gain any foothold, because he had very good management skills and he knew who to put in what position, and he had a lot of experience in that because his father was doing the same thing. Abu Sufyan was the leader of the Quraysh at one point in time. He embraced Islam with his father, Abu Sufyan, during the conquest of Mecca, and he was only 25 years old at the time. He was very educated. So he came from a very upper class family, and due to his education, he was one of the few people who could read and write among the people of Mecca, and Arabia. So he became one of the scribes of the Prophet, peace be upon him. He used to actually be a scribe who would write down some of the revelation and write down some of the letters that the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to dictate to him. During the time of Umar, again, keep in mind, Umar, we view Umar as like a really great, experienced, skilled leader, and a very tough one. He doesn't tolerate nonsense. He actually put Muawiyah in charge of Jordan in the first place. So he put him in the position of leadership over Jordan. And he put his brother in charge over Damascus. When his brother died in Damascus, he put Muawiyah in charge of Damascus, which was the most important city of that entire region of Sham. Entire region of Syria, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, the modern period, Damascus was the most important city. Not Jerusalem or anything like that. Politically, Damascus was the most important, and he put him in position. Even though Umar criticized his extravagant lifestyle. Do you remember he criticized him for wearing those clothes and for having some different habits, which he was upset with. But Muawiyah justified himself and says, the reason why we wear these clothes and the reason why we have this kind of show going on is because we have the Roman Empire next to us. And we need to show them a little bit of this to keep them in check. So Umar he didn't agree with the idea, but he didn't remove Muawiyah either. He said, I'm going to take your excuse. Personally, you're okay. So it means that the fact that Umar kept him in power and then Uthman kept him in power, this is a person who has generally been trusted by people of the past. All right? So when Muawiyah became the Khalifa, the capital of the Muslim empire, for lack of a better word, shifted to Damascus. So it started in Medina, and then under Ali it shifted to Kufa, and now it's shifting to Damascus. All right? What happens when that happens? What effect does that have? It has the effect on other cities. Cities like Mecca and Medina, right? Particularly Medina, now that it's not the capital of politics anymore, it becomes detached from politics. The reason why the capital had to be shifted to Kufa is because this is on the outskirts of the empire. You need to be in a place where there's a proper army so that you can guard from attacks coming in. Otherwise, if you're always in Medina, you're going to have at least a few days between any order. A messenger has to send a message from Kufa all the way back to Medina, and then Medina all the way back to Kufa. Or from Damascus to Medina, and then Medina back to Damascus. So it's better to be on one of these areas due to communication reasons. That's one of the reasons. But what effect it has on Medina is now Medina is detached from politics. So what ends up happening is Medina and places like Mecca, they become places of learning primarily. Places of knowledge, places of teaching, that becomes the primary focus. So that people are not, there's no armies, in Medina or anything like that anymore. There's not much political movement taking place over there. So it has an effect on these cities. During the reign of Muawiyah, a lot of things were accomplished. He built a very strong naval force with 2,000 ships. So he realized that the Romans were a very powerful force, and they basically dominated the seas. Although Muslims had developed, after Umar, during Uthman's time, they developed a navy, but at the same time, it was not that powerful. Muawiyah took it to another level, and now Muslims became basically they outdid the Romans in terms of their naval force. So he expanded this part of the military, and this kept the Romans in check very well. In fact, they kept them so much in check that in the year 48, he ordered an attack on Constantinople. Now keep in mind, Constantinople is the capital of the Roman Empire. Okay, because Rome is not the capital of the Roman Empire, because Rome had already fallen. There was a Western Roman Empire and an Eastern Roman Empire. The Western Roman Empire had already pretty much lost its power by this century. So it was the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, which was actually the real power in the region. They're still Romans, they're called Romans, but they're the real power, and their capital was Constantinople. Constantinople is modern-day Istanbul. So what happened was, the fact that the capital of the Romans is being attacked during this time is a very important feat, because it's not a small thing. So they attacked by land and they attacked by sea. Okay, so if you look at this map, right, where are the Muslims? The Muslims, this is Mecca, Medina over here. This is Syria, so Damascus is right around here. So what's happening is now the Muslims control Egypt. Muslims have this entire region here. They have Iran and parts of these borders here. They have all of this right here. What's happening here is Muslims are sending army through here to Constantinople, as well as through sea around here to attack it from both sides. Okay, so this is a very strategic move, and it's a very important move. Okay, so what happened was he invited the senior companions who had retired from anything. They just basically retired from politics and retired from life after the civil war took place. They're living now in Medina. So some of the companions, like Abdullah ibn Zubayr, the son of Zubayr ibn al-Awam, the one that we saw, who was fighting alongside Aisha. Abdullah ibn Zubayr Abdullah ibn Abbas, Hussein, the son of Ali, and Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and others, they were all invited by Muawiyah to participate in this battle. Now this is interesting because there were other battles taking place, but you don't just go and summon random companions who are sitting in like a kind of spiritual retirement in the middle of, they don't want to have anything to do with anything basically because of all the politics that had just taken place. But he went and requested them, he says, if you're interested and we're going to Constantinople, if you want to come, you can come. All of them wanted to go. Why did they want to go? Because there was a prophecy by the Prophet, peace be upon him, that said the people who go and take Constantinople, they have a special position. They have a special place, and he said Constantinople will be taken from the Romans. So they realized that, you know what, we want to be part of this prophecy. So they basically went and they launched a siege against the city of Constantinople. It was an unsuccessful siege. So the Muslims did not succeed because if you look at Constantinople, it's a very well fortified and it's in such a perfect location. It's a very difficult city. This is like probably the best location, and that's why it's such an old historical site. So many civilizations have been in that place because it's one of the best and most strategic locations in the entire region to have a base on militarily. Right? So the attack was unsuccessful. The siege was not successful. And Abu Ayyub al-Ansari actually died in this battle. Now who is Abu Ayyub al-Ansari? This is the person who hosted the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he first came to Medina in his house. So my teacher makes an interesting point. He says these companions, they retired themselves, spiritual retirement in Medina. And he says, today we talk about, you know what, everyone wants to go and live in Medina. Everyone says, I would love to just pack up, just move myself and go stay in Medina. Right? And then just enjoy a life of retirement and everything. And he said, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, this is a person from Medina, this is a person who hosted the Prophet, peace be upon him, in his own house. He set an example. And his example was that we're not supposed to be these inactive people. When the time comes to do something, you go out and you go out and you do it. It's not about always retiring, I want the easy life and the comfortable life. They were not here retiring for the comfortable life. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, Medina was his place. Medina was his household. But he preferred to go and die on the borders of Istanbul, and he was buried right in front of the enemy defenses. And that's why his body is still there. And people, who visit Turkey and stuff like that, you can see that his grave is still marked over there, and people go and visit. The thing is, what does that tell you? It tells you that he realized that it's not about just staying in one place, or it's not about being, just in a retirement state or something like that. This is a person who was already aged, but when the time came to respond to a call, he went for that greater call. So it's a really good lesson for all of us. What were some of the consequences? Even though the attack on Constantinople was a failure, they did not succeed, but there were some very important consequences. See, up until now, the Romans kept on attacking the Muslims on a regular basis. They're always trying to take back their territories in Africa and take back their territories in, Anatolia and in, near Syria. They probably couldn't get close to Syria, but the closer regions which they could actually attack. And they were intercepting Muslim ships in the ocean as well. So the thing is, we need to understand what took place. What took place was this attack made the Romans realize that we are so vulnerable, we cannot attack Damascus, which is the capital of the Muslims. But they have managed to attack us at our own capital, and we can't afford this anymore. So we need to either make some peace with them, or we need to, stop provoking an attack, because we're not going to be able to withstand this anymore. If they go and attack one or two more times, we're going to lose our capital of Constantinople, and we're going to lose our grip on the entire area. So there were really important ramifications of this siege which took place. All right, so it kind of keeps the Romans in check and kind of prevents them from going and attacking some of these main regions. This is a constant state of war. You have to keep that in mind. Okay, this is what happens when an empire loses part of its thing. They're going to keep on attacking until you have some way to stop them from attacking. In the year 50 AH, 50 after Hijrah, Uqba ibn Nafi', okay, he was the military commander over Egypt in Africa, right? He was ordered to move westwards. All right, so let's take a look at the map in a second. He was ordered to move west in Africa. So they're in northern Africa, Egypt. He said, move towards the west. He started moving. He moved all the way west towards Tilimsan, very important city in western Algeria. And Muslims conquered that area. Then he kept on moving and he reached Qayrawan. Now Qayrawan is modern day Tunisia. And what he did was he had the entire forest of that region cut down and he constructed a city known as the city of Qayrawan. Within 5 years, the city of Qayrawan became one of the most important cities in the entire world. All right, and it's still a very important city, but in the past, it's been a very, very important city throughout history. So this was a city, and it was constructed at this time, and it was quickly populated and became one of the major cities of that region. We're talking about from Egypt, moving all the way through Libya, right, up through Tunisia, Qayrawan here, moving all the way through Algeria. So they're basically taking the entire North African region. Who's in control of this region? Before the Muslims got here, who's in control of this? Romans. So the Muslims said, we already talked about this. They had taken it one time before, right? And then they lost it because the Romans took it back. Now he's going back in one more time and he's sweeping further west. This is all Roman territory. This is something that we don't understand. Romans had this entire territory to them. All right, they're here and they had conquered all of this land. So we're not talking about some native peoples or something like that. We're talking about the Roman Empire colonizing the entire northern Africa and Muslims taking it from the Romans who are at war with them. So Uqba ibn Nafi' went and established that city and kept on moving towards the west. Around the same time, in the same year, Muawiyah was convinced that all the civil war and everything that's taken place, we need to make sure that when he passes away, we're not going to have disunity among the community. So he got convinced by somebody that he should appoint his own son as his successor. And this became a major problem. So what did they say? So he agreed to the idea and he became convinced that, you know what? Because Muawiyah had united the entire Muslim community. Basically, there is no one is rebelling or opposing Muawiyah's rule during this time. So he sees that so many years of success. He ruled for 20 years. Right? Without any contest, without any major problems. So because of that, he said, you know what? Let's maintain, this is 5 years before his death. 15 years after ruling, it comes up, somebody gives him the idea, appoint your son so that they have this kind of legitimacy towards you. Because they have so much respect for you, you can maintain that respect by appointing your son, Yazid. The problem is, his son was extremely unqualified to lead. He was a very spoiled kid. He used to just play around. He used to go on hunting expeditions and he was leading the good life. Very like a spoiled brat basically, son of a very powerful and influential person, but, didn't have very good, manners, leadership skills or anything like that. So now there's a problem. Appointing the son is something that no one else has ever done except the Romans and the Persians. And number two, this guy is probably one of the most unqualified people to lead the entire Muslim community. So what happened was, they started going around, and he was convinced of this idea. It's probably the biggest fault of his. He started going around, and he said, I want everyone to pledge right now that after my death, they're going to accept Yazid as the Khalifa. So they started going around to all the places and getting the proposal from them. Now, most of the people started agreeing. Now, did they agree because they thought Yazid is a great guy and he's qualified? No. Because Muawiyah had so much power and influence, no one was really going to oppose him openly, okay, except a few people. So the few people that did oppose him were the senior companions in Medina, who were there in Constantinople, like Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and Hussein. These are four main people who opposed him openly. And this was their reasoning. Their reasoning was that this will create a dynastic system. A dynasty where you just appoint your son, when you're about to die, you appoint your son, and it becomes like a kingship now. So now you're not a Khalifa really anymore, you're going to be more of a king. So this is something that the Romans do, and the Persians do, but Muslims never did this before, and we should not start this. This is an innovation, and we should avoid it, otherwise it's going to cause a problem in the future. And number two, Yazid is like the most unqualified person for this task. So you should not be appointing him either. And they also told him openly that you're not doing this for the good of the community. Because this is not for the good of the community. You're doing this for tribal reasons. So they were very open and very blunt with him. But he stuck to his position. But the way, this is very important, the way that he stuck to his position, he said, you know what? That's your opinion. I don't agree with it. He didn't persecute them. He didn't have them killed. He didn't start propaganda, against them or anything like that, because these are senior companions, and this is one of their friends as well. So this is how he dealt. He just said, this is not a big deal. Let these people not agree, and we don't have to worry about it. So everyone had pledged allegiance over a period of 5 years that they're going to accept Yazid as their leader, except these 4 people and maybe a few of their followers as well, openly. But he didn't do anything about it. So he didn't force them to do anything like that. Perhaps if Hassan was alive at this time, it might have been that Muawiyah would have been ready to yield power back to him. Because remember, Hassan yielded power over to Muawiyah, right? This would have been a good opportunity to yield it back to him instead of yielding it to his son. But the problem is Hassan had already been poisoned and he'd been killed before this decision was reached. Okay, so some people have tried to accuse Muawiyah or something like that, but there's absolutely no evidence that he did something, along those lines. And probably, if Hassan would have yielded the first time, he would have yielded the second time as well. So it's not a very strong theory. So Muawiyah was on his deathbed and he was dying. And while he was dying, he called his son and he tried to give him some instructions. I want you to rule like this. By the way, Muawiyah, once the idea came 5 years prior to his death, people realized that, this guy is not qualified. So he started sending sending his son to like some training places, learn some etiquette, learn some military skills, go learn some politics, learn some discipline. So he was getting trained. Okay, he was getting a little bit better, but he was still not that suited for the job. So when Muawiyah was on his deathbed, he basically got into a dispute with his son. He's telling him, this is what I want you to do. I want you to rule this way. And his son said, I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. I'm going to rule the way I feel like ruling. So there was a dispute. Perhaps he regretted his decision on his deathbed, but it was too late to make any change. Allah knows best. So Muawiyah, may Allah be pleased with him, he passed away. Senior companion passed away as well. So Yazid ibn Muawiyah, Yazid the son of Muawiyah, ibn means son, takes power in the year 60 AH. And now we have a major problem. So 20 years after the civil war, 20 years of general peace, successful time during for the Muslims, expansion, pretty much everything was going okay. No major rebellions, revolts or anything like that. But this move caused the problem. So Yazid comes into power. Okay, so Yazid comes into power, he becomes the next Khalifa, everyone takes the oath. Many of the people were pressured into taking the oath because they took the oath when Muawiyah was alive because they respected him. Now, there's an opportunity to say, okay, now that Muawiyah is gone, this guy actually doesn't really deserve it. But there was a lot of pressure being put on people. So most people accepted, with the exception of the same 4. And these 4 companions represent, a lot of people, particularly in Medina, because they have a high status. So there are 2 groups. The first of them is Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas. So Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas refused to pledge to Yazid. They said, you're not deserving to be the Khalifa and we're not going to accept you. But Yazid didn't worry about them because both of them were not interested in becoming the Khalifa or having any power themselves. So he didn't worry about them. He said, these 2 people are not an issue. If they want to go and have their own little, camp, they're not going to start major propaganda, they're not going to start a rebellion, and they're not a threat to my power at all. So he left Abdullah ibn Abbas and he left Abdullah ibn Umar because their policy was, stay out of politics. Other 2 didn't have the same policy. And that was Hussein, the brother of Hassan, son of Ali, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr. 2 also very important companions. But they were ready to openly rebel. So what happened? They're living in Medina. Abdullah ibn Zubayr decides this is an opportunity. I'm out of Medina, I'm moving to Mecca, and we're going to see what happens. Hussein is staying in Medina, and Yazid orders him to be arrested. As soon as he got word that he's going to be arrested, he fled, and he also traveled to Mecca. So both these 2 personalities, these very important personalities here, Hussein and Abdullah ibn Zubayr have landed in Mecca. Once they are in Mecca, they're openly opposing Yazid. So the people of Mecca give their pledge to Abdullah ibn Zubair. Not for the Khalifa, but for rejecting the Khalifa. So basically they give their pledge of loyalty that says, we are with you no matter what. We will reject this Yazid guy because he doesn't deserve to be the Khalifa, and we need to somehow overthrow him. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how to do it right now, but you're a more qualified person. We're giving you our pledge not to be Khalifa of the entire Muslim world, but just to get rid of this guy somehow. Figure out a way. So Abdullah ibn Zubair is in Mecca, and he removes the governor of Mecca that was appointed or loyal to Yazid. So basically Abdullah ibn Zubair takes over the city of Mecca. And he's in control of it now, and he's governing. He's basically become the governor of Mecca, disconnected from the caliphate or the khilafah of Yazid. Okay, so now we have one person in Mecca. Hussein is also in Mecca. Hussein does not pledge to Abdullah ibn Zubair, although he respects him very much, and they're both friends, but he's living in Mecca. What happens now is, the people of Kufa, remember the people of Kufa, the ones who always were trying to support Ali, they were always on the side of Ali, and actually they ended up, becoming very lazy and lax, and they wouldn't really listen to what he's saying and everything. He became, sick and tired of them near the end of his life. They decide that, you know what, we still have a loyalty to Ali. So we need to renew that loyalty again, and we can make Hussein, the leader, in order to substitute for his father Ali. The people of Kufa rally around Hussein, and they start writing letters to him. And they say, you know what? Everyone in Kufa actually supports you. And they actually want you to be the Khalifa. So you come to Kufa, and we will start a rebellion. We'll get rid of Yazid, and we'll reestablish unity with a just leader over the entire Muslim ummah, over the entire Muslim community. So basically, they start sending letters, and they start inviting him, and they say, we're going to give you the Pledge of Allegiance to be the Khalifa. Okay? So he's receiving all these letters. Now he knows the people of Kufa are not the most reliable people in the world. So he goes and he sends his cousin to Kufa to say, check out the situation. See if these people are really dedicated or they're not dedicated. So the cousin goes to Kufa and secretly, because remember, Yazid controls Kufa. He controls every place except Makkah now. So he sends his cousin to Kufa, and he starts going and seeing, who's really interested in giving the pledge of loyalty to Hussein. In the first day of him being there, 12,000 people took the pledge. They said, we're ready to support you 100%. That's a lot of people. So Hussein gets the news back. He's still in Makkah. He's getting letters back from his cousin saying that, you know what, you have so much support in Kufa. Everyone is ready. They've all taken the pledge. They've broken the pledge with Yazid, and they're with you. Let's start this rebellion and get rid of this guy. So then Hussein goes and he sends a letter to the people of Basra. All his supporters in Basra, rallies them together and says, you guys make it on your way to Kufa, and I'm coming with my entire family, and we're going to launch a rebellion from Kufa. And I'm going to take over Kufa, and we're going to take over this entire thing and reestablish the Khalifa, Khilafat again, everywhere. So everything is going good, everything is coming according to plan. Until the news leaked to Yazid. The news leaked that there's a rebellion taking place, and Hussein is trying to rebel against his authority. So what does he do? He makes a decision, and the decision was, good for him, but a really, unfortunate decision. He immediately removes the governor of Kufa from his position, because he saw that the governor there is very weak. So he's not going to be able to handle this situation. And what does he do? He installs a man by the name of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is a guy who's known to be tyrannical. He's a guy who's known to be, have no mercy. He rules with the iron fist. So he sends this guy to take care of the situation in Kufa right now. And this is exactly what the guy does. So the moment this guy gets there, he is now the governor of Kufa. He finds out, he sends all his guys around, he intercepts all the letters that were being sent, all the correspondence between Hussein and the people of Kufa, he gets all of them. He prepares a master list. These are all the people who were siding up, these were the main leaders who were siding up with Hussein. He takes them and he publicly executes them. Starts killing them publicly in front of everyone, throwing their body off of the roof, hanging their dead bodies in front of everyone. Everyone became a very gruesome way of killing them. Everyone became scared. No one lifted a finger to do a thing. So the people of Kufa, again, extremely unreliable. They were failing Ali, and now they're failing Hussein as well. But he was very intelligent. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was very intelligent. So what did he do? He cut off communications for the entire city. So Hussein is already on his way to Kufa with only a few hundred people and all his family. Children, women, grandparents, everyone. He's traveling by himself, a small group, no army or anything, to Kufa, thinking that right now he has no communications. Right? So he has no idea what's going on. He has no idea his own followers are being executed publicly. And there's no rebellion. The rebellion is finished, basically. And no one lifted a finger, nobody did anything. So he's traveling on his way, thinking that, you know what, rebellion's about to start. I have all my followers, Kufa is going to be taken. While he's traveling, he reaches a place called Karbala. And Karbala, outside, a little bit distance from Kufa, before he reaches the area, he gets intercepted by one of the armies of Ibn Ziyad, which was sent out to go and find him, because he knew that Hussein is going to be on his way. Once they arrive, right? Once they see the Hussein and they see his family. Oh, by the way, before Hussein left Mecca, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, other companions, they encouraged him not to go. They said, don't go. You cannot trust the people of Kufa. These are not reliable people. They failed your father and they're going to fail you. You shouldn't go. And he didn't listen to their advice. He says, no, there's so many people who responded. We should go and we need to get rid of, we need to overthrow this, Yazid guy. Then they said, okay, if you don't listen to our advice, at least don't take your family. Just take some of your, take your children and the ones who can fight. Don't take the women with you. Don't take the children with you. Because in case something happens, your entire family can get wiped out. So you don't want to do this. And he didn't listen. He said, no, it's going to be successful in Kufa, and I don't have time to come back for my family again. This thing is going forward all the way. So he went ahead and he moved forward to Kufa. So he stopped in Karbala. So what happened was, on his way, the army intercepted him at Karbala, and they tried to force him to pledge to Yazid. Now look, this army consists of people who either, one, were fighting in the army of Ali, his father. So obviously they don't want to, kill Ali's son. Or number two, the people who, once the leaders were publicly executed in Kufa, the people who had pledged to him and said, you know what, we're going to support you and everything, they were recruited into the army by force. So these people are the same people who are going and intercepting Hussein right now, and they're about to fight against him. Right? So this is a major problem here. This is a huge issue taking place. So Hussein sends a message to them, and he says, look, now I realize this rebellion is over. I realize all of you have betrayed me, and nothing's going to happen now. Give me two options. Either one, let me go to Damascus and send a messenger with me. I'm going to go to Damascus. I'm going to deal with Yazid personally. We'll have a discussion and we'll resolve our differences politically. Option number one. Option number two, let me go back to Mecca, and I'm just going to retire there. I'm going to live there. There's not going to be any more rebellion, and I can just teach or something like that. Let me go back to Mecca. They were inclined to let him go, but Ibn Ziyad was the guy in charge, and he says no. The question is, why did he say no? He said no because he wants the glory of getting Hussein to pledge to Yazid. And he thought that he's going to get some really important, position or something like that, having someone who didn't pledge, forcing him to pledge. He decides he's going to attack. He's going to attack Hussein. So what happens? They're trying to force Hussein to, make this pledge. So they stop water from getting to the tents. So they're surrounded, and they're all in tents with their family and everything. So they cut off the water supply, and his family is basically starving because he has a whole family with him. So everyone is starving. There's only two options. Option number one is you fight. Option number two is you pledge. Because they cannot remain there anymore. There's no time to think. There's no time to bargain, because you're going to die in the desert of thirst. So what does Hussein do? He tells his other friends that you guys can make an agreement with Ibn Ziyad's army and you get amnesty and you leave. I don't mind. There's no point in you being killed here. But I'm standing on principle and I'm going to fight. Doesn't matter. I know there's no chance. We're talking about thousands and thousands of soldiers versus after the people left him, less than 100. Right? So he decides, no, I'm going to fight and I'm going to become a martyr, because if I make that pledge, then I'm pledging to something which I don't accept on a moral basis. I would rather die than accept the pledge to Yazid. This was Hussein's stance. So what does he do? And his family is there in the tent. And they're yelling and they're screaming and they're crying that, Hussein is going to die. And he quiets them down. He says, look, you don't cry about this. This is part of life. And don't give them the pleasure of seeing them that we're sad. We're not sad. We're going to do what we need to do. And he took all of his sons and he took other close family members. And he went and he fought and he was martyred. And he was killed. So when he was martyred, all of his family members who were, men and able to fight, every single one of them was killed, including Hussein. Everyone that fought was killed. Only people who were spared were the women and the children who were in the tents. Now, every one of Hussein's sons died except one. And that was because he was too young. The youngest son, Ali ibn Hussein. And he becomes an important figure later on in history. He's also known as Zainul Abidin. Ali, the son of Hussein. So this one, he's a very important figure, comes later on. We're not going to study his life in detail, but just keep his name in the back of your head. What did they do with Hussein? They cut off his head and they sent it to Damascus, to Yazid. And this is the brutal tactics, right? But these were the tactics that happened. Doesn't mean that it's legitimate, doesn't mean that it's allowed, but this is what happened. So they cut off his head and they sent it over to Yazid. Now some stories say that Yazid was not happy at all. He said, I didn't order you to kill. This is the grandson of the Messenger of Allah. He said, I didn't order you to kill the grandson of the Messenger of Allah. Others say that, these were crocodile tears. They were not, real sadness, because he went and he sent a guy like Ibn Ziyad in the first place to go and deal with these things. So Allah knows best what his real position was. But after this tragedy at Karbala, and this is a very important incident in history, it's very well known, very well remembered incident at Karbala. When this happened, Abdullah ibn Zubair in Mecca decided to declare himself the Khalifa. And at that point he said, okay, now that Hussein is gone, and now that all of these things have transpired, they basically murdered him, they murdered his family, they took Kufa, they got a maniac guy like Ibn Ziyad in Kufa, we need to carry out this rebellion now. So he goes and declares himself as the Khalifa, and the people of Mecca pledged themselves to him as the Khalifa at this point in time. Let's talk about Abdullah ibn Zubair. Abdullah ibn Zubair, he was the son of Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr. Okay, so Abu Bakr's daughter, Asma, is his mother. Okay, so he's a very important figure. He was the first child born in Medina after the Prophet, peace be upon him, migrated to the city. And it was a very, very important incident, because the Jews were accusing the Muslims that they had bad luck because none of them were able to have children for a while. They said, see, the Prophet came to your city, you people are cursed now, he's a curse for you. So they were waiting for a child to be born. It had to do with the environment and the climate and all of that. So a child was born, the first child that was born was Abdullah ibn Zubair. Everyone was celebrating. The reason why they were celebrating is not just because the first child that's born, it's because they disproved this attack that was being leveled against them. So he's considered, everyone celebrated his birth. And he was very close to the Prophet as a young child and everything like that. So he grew up in front of the Prophet. So he's a son of a very important companion and from a very important family. So he had the clout and he had the authority to actually be the Khalifa. And he would have been a very good Khalifa. Let's look at some other events which took place. So now he's in Mecca. One Khalifa is in Mecca and the other Khalifa is in Damascus. One Khalifa controls Mecca and the other Khalifa, Yazid, controls what? Everything. Everything. Right? So this is, so we're going to see what takes place now. In the year 62, so despite all of this stuff that's going on, there's still good news taking place. So in the year 62, Uqba ibn Nafi', the guy we just talked about, who was going across northern Africa, he traveled all the way west to the Atlantic Ocean. He made it all the way to Morocco, and he hit all the way west, hit the Atlantic Ocean. Right? Once he hit the Atlantic Ocean, and this is all Roman territory that they're taking, by the way, he reached the coast and he made a very important statement. And the statement was, he said, "Oh Allah, if this sea had not come in my way, I would have kept fighting for your cause until the end of the earth. I would have just kept on going west." So for him, there's a sea in the way. Right? At that point in time, they didn't realize that there's more land to the west. What land is to the west? America, right? So very interesting, right? He would have been prepared and he would have been ready. How history would have changed had they sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. So what happened? But it was not meant to be. It was not meant to be at that time. So what happened was, just on an individual level, Uqba was a very important, successful military commander. He conquered the Romans, and the Romans were, the Berber people, were basically living in this area at that time, and they were controlled by the Romans. Once he took over these cities, these are people who basically have submitted themselves, right? Either they submitted or they surrendered peacefully when there was a siege on their city. That means that they're supposed to honor that surrender, right? So what happened was, while he was traveling back to his headquarters in Qayrawan, a group of Romans and Berbers teamed up against him and ambushed him when he had a small group of people, and they killed him. So he's removed. And he's gone. The Romans went back and they recaptured the city of Qayrawan, and they recaptured all of these areas. The reason why they can recapture it, you have to understand something here. Back to the map. Okay, we're looking at Qayrawan in Tunisia over here. If you're traveling all the way to Morocco and you hit the coast, and you've taken all the whatever major cities are along this area, the moment you lose this city here, you automatically lose all the cities to the west. Because of the way the technology was. You don't have airplanes that can fly around and everything. If you lose this, all your supplies coming from here to here are cut off now right here, and you're automatically going to lose everything. That's just the way it worked at that time. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're trying to understand, who's losing what city, who's taking what city, etc. This is a very overstretch of an empire, given that technology of that time. So they conquered Qayrawan, although he made it all the way to the west coast. In this year 63, the people of Medina decided to revolt against Yazid. So now we're talking about a popular revival, and they revolted against Yazid, and they ousted their governor. They got rid of the governor in Medina. So what did Yazid do? He sent an army to attack Medina. So an army is actually attacking Medina. The last time that Medina was attacked was when? When was the last time the people of the city were actually attacked? The Battle of the Trench. Since that time, the city's never been touched. So now you have Yazid attacking the city of Medina, and they succeeded. They succeeded, and they made everyone in the city pledge one more time to Yazid. In humiliation, anyone who failed to pledge was killed now. So now we see politics changing. Politics is not the same anymore, that if you don't pledge, okay, fine, we'll let you be there. Now you pledge or you're going to die. Okay, so I don't know how many people were killed, but they had to pledge. In the year 64, Yazid has already taken Medina, and literally the army is there. Now he goes up to Mecca, and he besieges the city of Mecca. Right? Completely besieging the city of Mecca, to get rid of Abdullah ibn Zubair, who's ruling in Mecca at this time. While Mecca is being sieged, remember, Mecca is a special city. You don't want to, this is a city where it's protected. People are not supposed to be harmed in this city. So he goes and sieges Mecca, and Yazid dies at that point in time. While the siege is going on, and there's Yazid's battle army around there, he dies at the age of 39, at a very young age. So what happens now? Upon his death, the same army that was besieging Abdullah ibn Zubair inside Mecca, they go and send a message to Abdullah ibn Zubair, now that Yazid is gone, we're ready to declare you as the Khalifa. What does it tell you? It tells you that they were more coerced into actually following Yazid, and they just didn't have the courage to rebel against his rule. Either you join the army and you do what he says, or you're going to be in trouble. So basically they sent a message to Abdullah ibn Zubair and they said, look, you've already declared your Khalifa only in Mecca, in one place. This is the time. Yazid is gone now. His son, who might take over after him, he's only 20 years old. He's in no position to lead. You're the best person, and this is the time now. Because his son doesn't have the type of authority that he has, or the skills that he has. So now you come to Damascus, and you become the Khalifa in Damascus. Now this was the tactical mistake that Abdullah ibn Zubair made. He said, no, I'm going to stay in Mecca, and if you want to pledge, you pledge to me while I'm in Mecca right now. And they said, look, this is not going to work. You don't realize how powerful the Banu Umayyah clan is. In Syria, they have so much power. If you don't come over there, they're going to manage to get their own support and they're going to rule from that area, so you should come and leave Mecca. And he said, no, I'm going to stay in Mecca because these are the first people that pledged to me, and I'm going to stay loyal to them, and the capital is going to be from here. So that army decided that, you know what, we can't pledge to you right now. We don't know what's going to happen. We're going to see what happens later on. So they didn't pledge to him. He refused and he decided to remain in Mecca. Okay? Then they went to Zainul Abidin, same army. They go to, who's Zainul Abidin? Ali ibn Hussein, the son of Hussein. They go to Zainul Abidin and they say, look, your Ali died, Hussein died, your father now died, now it's your opportunity, it's your chance. You should be made the Khalifa. So you take this opportunity because you can, you come to Damascus and you can unite the Ummah. Basically, everyone is looking for somebody to unite the Ummah and remove the problems. But who actually has the clout to do it? That's the question. Who can actually do it and who has the authority and the influence over everyone? Because not the whole Ummah is all looking for unity. There are sections which are very powerful that don't care about unity. And there's the rest of the people who do care about unity. And other people maybe who don't care. So how do you unite the Ummah? That's what everyone's trying to figure out. Zainul Abidin refused. And he says, I made a promise to Allah that I will never be in any position of authority throughout my entire life. After seeing what happened to my grandfather and seeing what happened to my father and all the politics that's taking place, I don't want to have anything to do with politics. And I will never take any position of leadership whatsoever. So the people said, okay, he's a lost cause then. He's not going to be our leader. So we're going to go back to Syria and we're going to see what happens. So what happens next? In the year 64, Yazid's son is put into power. Okay? He's only 20 years old. He's very sick. This is a very ill child. He was pretty pious. He was known to be pretty pious. And he had no interest in leadership. So not only is he young, not only is he sick, he's about to die, he doesn't care about leadership. So he went and openly told the people, I don't want to be Khalifa and I don't care for this. They said, no, you have to be because that's the way it was. Your grandfather put his son in charge and now your father is putting his son in charge. You have to be the Khalifa. So he really didn't care. He said, you guys can do whatever you want. So he became Khalifa. He was more like a lame duck, sick half the time. Within a few months, he died because he was very sick. And when he was dying, he told the people, he said, I don't care, I never cared about this position, and I still don't care about this position. They said, appoint somebody. Said, I'm not going to appoint anyone. Now how can he appoint his son? He's only 20 years old, he probably didn't have any children. Obviously you can't appoint anybody. So now the whole concept of dynasty is coming to an end. Right? And he doesn't care, he said, you guys can choose whoever you want. I could care less about the leadership position. When he was put into the position of Khalifa, this is actually an important point. When he was put into position of Khalifa, only 20 and ill, only the Syrians and Egyptians actually pledged to him in the first place. So when Yazid died, pretty much people lost their authority. Like the Umayyads lost their authority. Syria and Egypt, now why Syria and Egypt? Because they're next to each other and they have connections with each other. These two pledged. Who didn't pledge? The entire Arabia didn't pledge. The entire Iraq and the eastern region, Iran and all of that. Remember, whatever happens in Iraq, Iran is going to follow because the rule works that way. So there's a east, there's a west, and then there's the Arabian region in the Muslim empire. So two main regions did not pledge, only the western region pledged to Muawiyah, known as Muawiyah II. His name was Muawiyah ibn Yazid. So he was a young guy. So what happened during his time? Almost nothing. He almost didn't accomplish nothing. He didn't have the pledge from most people. And Abdullah ibn Zubair managed to get support in Medina, and he managed to get support in a little bit more part of Arabia. So Abdullah ibn Zubair's support goes up, and the Umayyad support basically shrinks down to Egypt and Syria only. Now when this guy is about to die, he says, I don't care about the Khalifa or anything like that. You guys do whatever you want, I'm not interested. So as soon as he died, and he died like immediately, he didn't even last a year. He lasted a few months or whatever. As soon as he died, there was a complete state of chaos among the Umayyad family. So the people in Syria, nobody knows what's going to happen. They have no Khalifa again. Right? So remember what happened after the Prophet, peace be upon him, died? They were deciding what to do and what's going to happen. The Umayyads are basically in the same boat. That now we have nobody to become Khalifa. We have no election process. This guy couldn't appoint anybody. We were following the dynasty way for the last 2 times. He can't appoint his son because he has none. What happens now? There's no official Khalifa. The only one who's kind of official Khalifa in this area, the only one who's official is Abdullah ibn Zubair. But he's not from the Umayyad family. So then we have a problem. Right? So what do we do? So at this point in time, it pretty much looked like things were changing. Okay? So as soon as he died, there's no Khalifa for several months. Abdullah ibn Zubair gets the pledge of allegiance from the entire region of Iraq. Okay, so the entire eastern region, Abdullah ibn Zubair pledges to Abdullah ibn Zubair. Palestine and Jordan pledge to Abdullah ibn Zubair. Egypt pledges to Abdullah ibn Zubair. So everyone started pledging to Ibn Zubair, basically, except a few places in Syria. Okay, but the governor of Damascus himself secretly wanted Abdullah ibn Zubair to be the Khalifa. So basically almost the entire Muslim world now is united that Abdullah ibn Zubair should be the Khalifa, and we're all ready to support him. So it looked like the Umayyad family and the Umayyad period and the Umayyad dynasty is finished. And it's about to be, now we're going to come back to a popularly elected Khalifa who's a companion of the Prophet and who's going to unite the Ummah and bring justice back to the entire Muslim world. So everything is looking good at this point in time, but it was not meant to be. It was not meant to be. And what happened is that this Ibn Ziyad guy comes back from Iraq to Damascus. And he tells the Umayyad family, look, you know me. I'm a crazy guy. I can do whatever. I got an army behind me and everything. I'm going to support you. And he puts his pledge and his support behind Marwan ibn al-Hakam. He says, you become Khalifa and we will make sure that we're going to deal with all these people who are pledging themselves to Ibn Zubair. So he pledged his support and the Umayyad family pledged their support. Most of them, not all of them. What does this guy do? Marwan ibn al-Hakam, he goes and he fights his own family. So this is infighting between the Umayyad family. He fights his own family in Damascus and he takes control of it by force and kills the governor of Damascus in the year 65. Establishes himself as Khalifa. Now Abdullah ibn Zubair right now has the entire Muslim world, and this guy has what? Only has Damascus and a few parts of Syria. Not even Palestine, not even Jordan or any of these other regions. Okay? Then he goes with his forces and he defeats the supporters of Ibn Zubair in Palestine, retaking the region, and he defeats them in Egypt. So he goes and he basically spreads his army and takes over Palestine, takes over Egypt, takes over Jordan, takes over the entire western region again. Where was Abdullah ibn Zubair? Now we don't know that he was in Makkah. Yeah, he was in Makkah. The question is, where was he in trying to stop this? Right? So the thing is, we don't know exactly how much authority he had, how much loyalty and dedication he had, but he did not send sufficient amount of reinforcements to go and help the people of Palestine and the people of Egypt at this time. Because he assumed that, you know what, they've already pledged to me, they can handle the situation themselves. They have their own army, right? They're completely capable of managing it. So he figured that they can deal with it themselves, so he did not send anybody to go and help them. What sign did that give to them? We don't have any backup. Yeah, we support the guy, but this army of Ibn Ziyad and these guys, they're too powerful. So after they were defeated, they said, you know what are we going to do? It means that this guy is not strong enough, at least in their mind. He's not strong enough to back us up when we need to be. And we can't have an empire we can't function like this politically. You have to have power, you have to have strength. Otherwise, we're just going to keep getting, our armies are going to get defeated and we're going to be taken over any time. So this was another major tactical blunder from Abdullah ibn Zubayr. He underestimated the influence and the power of the Umayyad family. He thought that, now that they've lost their clout and everything, he didn't realize that they've been in power for decades. And that creates this perception in the minds of people that this is a family that is very powerful, we don't want to mess with them. So as soon as they exercise they flex their muscle, people get scared. So this is exactly what happened. So he lost the entire western region almost immediately. Didn't even last a few months. So he didn't even get an opportunity to really do much in this time. So now we will move on about what the people of Kufa did. Again, unfortunately. Now keep in mind, the reason why it's not like you have a hatred against, some people actually take this into see, the Iraqis are like this. This is not about Iraqis or some of that. The reason why the people of Kufa are very unreliable people is, what did Kufa start out as? A military base. Right? This is a military base. It is a very important military base. How much education, Islamic education, do you think is taking place in a military base where people are fighting non-stop, going out in Central Asia and going out against the Persian Empire and all that? How much time do you think they have for Islamic education? A lot less than people who are living in Mecca or Medina or in other places. What happens with people in the army? Right? Generally, if they're not that educated, or they're taught to follow orders, right? That's the way they're trained. So they're more emotional. So if you sway them this way, they can be easily swayed that way. If you sway them this way, so we're not talking about the most amazing, enlightened people in Kufa at this time. But later on, Kufa is becoming a major city. Later on, some of the most brilliant minds come out of Kufa. Some of the greatest scholars come out of Kufa. So don't start judging Kufa. When we say people of Kufa, we mean at this time, people of Kufa are a problem. Doesn't mean throughout history. Just keep that in mind. So in the year 65 AH, the people of Kufa, they started feeling guilty for betraying Hussein. So these are the same people who didn't do anything when there was people getting killed. Now they're feeling guilty. So the people of Kufa decide, this is the perfect time to take revenge now. To take revenge on who? Who is really responsible for the massacre of Hussein? Ibn Ziyad. So now they say, this is the perfect opportunity to get this Ibn Ziyad guy. Now that there's some chaos going on, and they're, the Abdullah ibn Zubair and Marwan, they're fighting together. They're trying to figure out, who's going to be the authority. So now is the time to get this Ibn Ziyad guy, because all we care about really is vengeance. So what happens? They decide to attack Ibn Ziyad. They gather an army together and they try and fight this guy who's very tyrannical. But he found out that they're preparing to go and attack him, so he assembles a huge army and he goes and attacks them first. And he defeats them. This battle was known as, this happened at a place called Ain al-Warda. It's also known as the Battle of At-Tawabin. Now why At-Tawabin? Tawabin meaning people who are repenting. People who are asking for forgiveness. Because all these people, the only reason why they're going and attacking Ibn Ziyad is not for Khalifa or anything like that. They just want to avenge Hussein's death. So they're known as the people of the Tawabin. They ask Allah for forgiveness for abandoning Hussein, and they decided to go and try and attack Ibn Ziyad, and they failed. So they were defeated, and many of them were killed. So just showing you what's taking place now. But what happened, by the way? See, the people here, Abdullah ibn Zubayr was in control of the eastern region, which the main cities of the east are Kufa and Basra, right? So these people decided to go against Abdullah ibn Zubayr's authority in order to get revenge for Hussein against Ibn Ziyad. So what actually did this lead to? It led to Abdullah ibn Zubayr losing his authority over Kufa, over a very important city. So now we have a triple division here. Now we have Marwan on one side, we have Ibn Zubayr in Mecca, and he lost Kufa, he lost Egypt, he lost Palestine, he lost Syria. He's basically losing all of his territory now. Again, in such a short period of time he got it, in a short period of time he's losing all of it. So it's showing you kind of what's going on in the politics that are happening. So Marwan, he's basically revived the Umayyad movement, but he was very concerned that Yazid's son was not chosen to be the Khalifa. He became the Khalifa, but Yazid, actually the first Yazid, had a son. And his son could have become the Khalifa. So he's looking at him and he's thinking, you know what? All of this politics going on, this guy, if he tries to revolt against me, he'll try and become Khalifa. So I need to stop him. So he decided that I'm gonna kill this guy. He made a plot to basically kill this guy to make sure that he himself stays in power. This is not a very good guy. He wanted to keep himself in power. So as soon as he made the plot, guess who he's married to? He's married to this Yazid's son's mother. So his mother finds out that this Marwan guy who's my husband is about to murder my son. We got right now, who's the Khalifa in Damascus? Marwan. Okay? So Marwan basically took power. Right? When almost Abdullah ibn Zubair was going to become the Khalifa, he took power in Syria himself. Right? Now, when he took power, was he the number one guy in line for the position of becoming Khalifa among the Umayyad clan? No. Who was the number one guy who should have been in line according to their standards? Yazid's other son. Okay? Because Yazid's one son who was sick, Yazid had another son. So that guy didn't have a son, but he had another son. It didn't come up yet, right? So now Yazid's other son should have been the first guy in line. I tried to remove as many names that are not important from these notes. Because I myself have a problem with names just as you have a problem with names. All the names that are here are really important names. The rest of them are not important. For me too, I don't care to remember their names. So Yazid had another son. He should have been in power. But Marwan took power. Right? So now Marwan is concerned, all this politics that's happening, this guy might challenge me and try to become the Khalifa himself. So what's the best thing to do? Get rid of him. Problem is, this guy's mother is Marwan's wife. He's married to his mother, right? Yazid's widow. So as soon as his mother got word, she's living in the house, she's living with him, she's the wife. She got word, she figured out somehow that he's trying to harm my son. So you have to choose between husband or you choose between son. And she chose the son. So what did she do? She hired some of the girls that live around the area, like the servants in the house. You get this guy while he's sleeping. So a bunch of girls, young women, they went in while he's sleeping, put some cotton in his mouth so he doesn't scream, strangled him to death and killed him. Marwan didn't even rule for 1 year. He didn't rule for a single year. It's in a way it's like, in a way you feel somewhat happy, but at the same time, okay, the guy's dead. But the thing is, this could have been the time where Abdullah ibn Zubair brought the entire Khalifa back on track. But this guy and the cronies around him basically stopped this process from happening. So this shows you kind of what you get, But he probably was, he was probably very close in the family, but he's still a very influential Umayyad person. So the thing is, the reason why the other son didn't get elected, because there was chaos. No one knew exactly what to do. Because usually, it should have been Muawiyah II, whose son becomes the Khalifa. But he's too young, and he's too sick, he didn't have any kids. So now they don't know what to do. So he usurped the power, basically. So he said, okay, this is the only guy who could rival me, let's get rid of him. So his wife said, okay, you're going to get rid of my son, we're going to get rid of you first. He's gone. So Marwan is gone. But they continue the tradition. So the Umayyads, true to their legacy, they said, well, even though Marwan is dead, we're still going to put his son in charge. So Abdul Malik, the son of Marwan, becomes the next Khalifa for the Umayyads. Right? Let's look at Abdul Malik. Not everyone starts out as being corrupt and interested in power and everything. So Abdul Malik was actually raised among scholars. And he studied among scholars. He studied under Sa'id ibn Musayyab. He studied among major scholars living at the time. So he had a pretty good upbringing. And he was very knowledgeable himself. He was a specialist in fiqh as well. So it was thought that he would be a lot better, or at least a little bit better than some of his predecessors. So let's take a look at and see what happened actually during his time. In the year 66, we're moving back to Kufa now. In Kufa, there's this guy named Mukhtar. Okay, this guy named Mukhtar, he gets this idea and he says, we're going to avenge the murder of Hussein. So you see what's happening in Kufa again? It's becoming, Ali and Hussein, we need to avenge. It's not about establishing khilafah or anything like that. It's mainly about getting vengeance from these people because this is the priority. So Mukhtar decides we're going to get vengeance for the murder of Hussein. Who's responsible? Ibn Ziyad. So we need to get this guy. So what does he do? So now Kufa, Abdullah ibn Zubair, he lost Kufa already. So this guy takes over and he almost takes over Basra. So Abdullah ibn Zubair almost loses Basra as well, but he managed to keep it. So this guy basically is saying, we're going to take over this entire region of Iraq and then we're going to get our vengeance. Before he establishes an army, he makes a list of every single person, just like Ibn Ziyad did, same tactics. Every single person who fought in the army of Ibn Ziyad against Hussein, arrested and massacred, killed, all of them. So he basically wants vengeance, but he's using the same tactics as the guy who he's trying to get vengeance from. Because a lot of the soldiers, remember, they were coerced, they were not interested, they did not want to actually harm Hussein, but a lot of them, they just joined the army out of force, out of pressure. So he doesn't care. Every one of them executed. So he massacred all these people for a few days. Then he goes to attack Ibn Ziyad. And he says, I got enough support, we're going to go and attack him. He goes towards Damascus, attacks Ibn Ziyad, and he actually defeats him, and he kills Ibn Ziyad. So he got his revenge. So now he sees that, I have a lot of authority. I have a lot of power. Guess what he does? He declares himself to be a prophet. So now all of a sudden, this guy declares prophethood. And he says, I'm the prophet and I receive revelation from Jibreel and this and this and this. It starts going on. So now you have a problem. Now, think about what's going on. All of these events are taking place, right? Abdullah ibn Zubair has just lost Kufa, Egypt, Damascus, Syria, Egypt. He lost most of his territory, right? Now what is he supposed to do? He's trying to get rid of the Umayyad dynasty to re-establish rule. And now he's got this problem over here in Kufa. So what does he do? He says, this guy's too dangerous, claiming prophethood and everything. We need to deal with this guy first. So he goes and he attacks Mukhtar. He attacks Kufa to return Kufa back. He ends up, to make a long story short, he ends up defeating Mukhtar. Mukhtar is dead, reclaims the city of Kufa. So now Abdullah ibn Zubair has the city of Kufa, he has Basra, and he has the Hijaz. Hijaz meaning Makkah and Medina, two most important cities. Okay. Now, in the year 71, thinking that things are getting better, in the year 71, Abdul Malik comes from Damascus and goes and attacks Kufa. It's just battle after battle, right? Goes and attacks Kufa, and he succeeds. The next year, he goes and he attacks Medina. The Medina is under whose control? Abdullah ibn Zubair, right? So now he goes and attacks Medina, and he successfully captures the city. This is Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, from the Khalifa in Damascus. Then it's time to go to Makkah. Now Makkah is the headquarters of Ibn Zubair. Ibn Zubair has lost everything up until this point. He lost every city that he possibly had. He only has Makkah left. What does Abdul Malik ibn Marwan? Because he's a little bit more knowledgeable, he's a little bit more understanding, he doesn't want to, he knows that no one is going to go and launch a siege against Makkah. So he makes the biggest mistake of his career and he chooses a guy. Now Ibn Ziyad is gone, right? So Ibn Ziyad was like the tyrant guy, but he can get things done. He goes and he puts a guy by the name of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf in charge to go and attack Makkah. Now Ibn Ziyad, we saw what kind of guy this was, right? Okay. This guy is like a little pony in front of Hajjaj. Hajjaj is the way worse than this. Okay, he's the worst of the worst. So he goes and besieges the city. Okay, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi. He besieges the city of Makkah during Ramadan. Of all times to do it, during Ramadan. He puts a catapult on Mount Qubais, which is outside of Makkah, and he starts firing the catapult into Makkah. And not just normal stones, We're talking about stones covered with cotton and sulfur, lit on fire, and he's launching them into Mecca. And while you're launching stones, the catapult is not the most accurate of weapons. So he's hitting the Kaaba, and he doesn't care. So he's hitting the Kaaba cloth catches on fire, cloth burns to bits. The walls are being charred, the walls are being destroyed from the side. One boulder lands on top of the Kaaba, and the roof of the Kaaba caves in. This is what's taking place at this point in time under this guy, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. So, all of this to do what? To get Ibn Zubayr to surrender. Because they want to just somehow take the city and get rid of this guy and maintain the Umayyad Khalifa. Abdullah ibn Umar, son of Umar, comes from Medina and he goes to perform Hajj. Now they've been launching catapults, launching rocks from catapults since Ramadan until the time of Hajj. Abdullah ibn Umar comes for Hajj and he tells Hajjaj, and he says, this is ridiculous. You need to stop this right now, at least stop for Hajj. Right? People are coming from all parts of the Muslim world and they're coming to Mecca to perform Hajj and you're launching catapults. How is someone going to perform tawaf? So if you're performing tawaf, you can get hit by a boulder and you're dead. So how is this going to work? So he convinces him to stop for a few days. Right? They should at least give them the opportunity to perform Hajj. This is the most he could do. This is a tyranny basically taking place. By the time of Hajj, Hajj is almost over. Most of Abdullah ibn Zubayr's followers, they desert him. And they join the Umayyad army in exchange for amnesty because they realize they're way too powerful. There's nothing we can do. We got a catapult up here. We got an army surrounding Mecca. What's going to happen? We don't control any other city. But Abdullah ibn Zubayr is like Hussein. He's a man of principle. And he said, it's not about winning. It's about taking the right stance. So it's a very tough decision in history. When do you compromise and when do you take a principled stance? So you see different figures. You see some figures retiring from politics and saying, you know what, no leadership whatsoever, we don't want to get involved in this. We have other people who are making compromises like Hassan. Said, you know what, let's compromise, give it to Muawiyah and let there be unity. And you have other people like Hussein and you have people like Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Doesn't matter what happens, we stick with the principle. We're not going to yield to this Umayyad family. So what does he do? He realizes that the entire Mecca is surrounded. He's not going anywhere. And then they go inside the city and they surround the entire area. So he goes to his mother, Asma. And he asks his mother, she's a very old woman by now, right? So imagine going to your own mother and asking you, what should we do in this situation? So he said, he started complaining to her. Everyone's abandoned me. We don't really have any army left. What should I do? Should I surrender? Should I just, take the pledge and just give myself up? And she gave a long speech. To make the long speech short, she said, you know what? Do you think that you're on the right path? He said, of course, I believe what I'm doing is right. She said, if you're on the right path, and all the people with you have died up until now, you're gonna let their deaths be in vain? If you're on the right path, then you remain steady until you die and become a martyr. This is his mother telling him. So she says, if you're asking my opinion, she said, you know better what you should do. If you want my opinion is that you never hand yourself over to somebody who you believe to be in the wrong. So then he was walking out. And when she hugged him, she was giving her final salam to him. So she hugged him and she felt that he was wearing some armor underneath his clothes. She said, what is this? He said, this is just armor. If I'm going to go out to fight, at least I can last a little bit longer with the armor. She says, this is not befitting of you. Take the armor off and go and die like a real man. This is his own mother speaking. So he goes out and literally he keeps on fighting with the few followers that he has inside the haram, meaning inside the holy sanctuary next to the Kaaba. And they surround this entire area and he's trying to block them off from entering from this door and that door, and they break in and they get him and they kill him. Abdullah ibn Zubayr was the last companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that ever held any position of authority in the Muslim world. And this is the unfortunate part of history. But where is the problem really? Right? Where did the real problem lie in all of this? Right? Why are the Umayyads so successful? I want you to understand that. They're successful because they have two things. They have political strength and they have wealth. they can only be successful if the people give in to political pressure and if the people give in to bribery and, being bought out. So the problem lies with people and the general community just as much as it does with a group of particular leaders. And that's a very important lesson to learn in history. Things got worse after this. Hajjaj was placed as the governor over Hijaz. So Hajjaj now is the governor over Mecca and Medina. What did he do? He began torturing and killing the most righteous of people in that city. Because he knew that only the righteous people would actually have the guts to speak up and do something. Whether now or in the future, or talk to them in a study circle or whatever. So he starts torturing and killing the righteous people. He starts torturing and killing the other companions that are left in Medina. And he kills Abdullah ibn Umar as well. So he's responsible for the deaths of so many people. After he was done, fixing that place up, he's transferred to Iraq. Why Iraq? Because the same people, Mukhtar and these guys, they're coming up again. Rebellions are starting. There's the Khawarij movement and everything. So Iraq, there's a lot of rebellions in Iraq. So Abdul Malik ibn Marwan sends Hajjaj over there. He says, look, there's a lot of rebellion movements coming up over there. You need to put them all down. The best person to use, not the nicest guy, but the best person who gets the job done is Hajjaj. I put this speech here just to give you an example of what Hajjaj is. You get an idea of a tyrant or something like that. Let me give you an example of what he's like. So he's transferred in the year 75 to Iraq. And he goes and he's about to give his inaugural address as governor. When someone becomes a governor of a city, you start speaking, this is going to be my political policy and everything. So the people of Kufa, they're very rebellious people, right? They're very uncouth and all of that. So they come, they're so used to insulting their leaders and all of that. They're like, very, kind of like, the hippie type movement, we don't care about authority and all of that. Maybe not the best analogy. They come with rocks and pebbles. They're prepared, right? We're going to start throwing, when he starts speaking, we're going to start throwing rocks at him. Right? So they all came with pebbles, they're ready. So we're going to heckle this leader, basically. So Hajjaj comes in, and I imagine how you would start a speech. You start a speech by saying, I've been placed in charge, and you have to respect my authority, and don't mess with. Just imagine what words you could use if you were a tyrant. Just imagine that for a moment. Now he goes up there, and people are before they start heckling him, he starts his speech, and this is exactly what he says. Just look at the words. He says, a lot of turbans and beards are visible here in this room, but very soon they're about to be wet with blood. Sentence number 1. I see turbans and beards and they're all about to get wet with blood. There are many heads present here in this gathering and they're about to be chopped off. This is our second sentence. Amir al-Mu'mineen Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he searched his quiver. Quiver is the thing that holds arrows. He searched his quiver and he found the toughest and the most deadly arrow and he just shot it at you people. And he said, that's me. That's me. And then he says, I'm going to fix all of you and I'm going to discipline every single one of you. The time has come for all of you to be taught a lesson and your eyes are going to be opened. This is not an empty threat. You're going to see with your own eyes that I do what I say. Can you imagine this? This is just like, it's going to scare the hell out of you, right? This is crazy, right? This guy's a maniac. So what does he do? He forced every single person to join the army. Every single person is joining the army, going to become a soldier, and we're going to go and attack another region right now. Anyone that refuses, anyone that doesn't join today, dead. Head is going to be chopped off. So some people came and they started making excuses. One guy said he had a legitimate excuse. I'm suffering from a hernia, and the previous governor, he told me that, I should not go out in the army. I said, okay, kill this guy. This guy's dead. Another guy came making an excuse, I'm really old and I can't move. Kill him too. So anyone who didn't join, this guy just ruled by force. He started killing everyone. A mistake that he made though, from another mistake that he made, he reduced the salary of the soldiers. So what happened was people, even who were loyal to him, they tried to overthrow him. And they almost succeeded. They almost got, to a sense where they killed him, almost overthrown him, but they weren't able to do so because he kept on getting reinforcements from Syria, from the capital. So this guy remained in power. Up until this point, Abdul Malik, the Khalifa now, the only Khalifa at this point in time, he probably the biggest mistake he ever made was using Hajjaj. Right? Worst thing that he ever did. But he has some accomplishments. There are some good things that he did too. So everyone has good things and bad things. This is obviously a very bad thing, but he has some good things. What were some of the good things that he did? He was the first person to cover the Kaaba with a silk cover. So before they used to use a cloth cover and all that, so he kind of adorned the Kaaba and decorated and everything. He reconstructed the Kaaba. Obviously he's responsible for messing it up in the first place. But he reconstructed it and made it better and nicer than it was before. He minted the first Islamic coins, which is interesting how it happened actually. So we talked about Omar having some coins and everything, but never, up until this point, throughout the Muslim world, Roman coins and Persian coins are still being used as common currency. So what happened was, at least as the story goes, is that Abdul Malik was in correspondence with the Roman Empire. And whenever they would send a letter, they would send a letter with the Shahada, testification of faith. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That's how they used to begin their letters. Because there are Muslims at the end of the day, despite their shortcomings. The Romans got upset. They said, you need to stop your letters with these statements. Because we don't like this statement, we don't agree with this statement. And if they threatened them, if you don't stop, then we're going to go and insult your prophet on our coins. And the thing is, the Muslims are using Roman coins. So what's going to happen? We're going to be insulting your prophet on our coins, and you're going to be using that yourself. So you better stop. So the Romans thought, you know what, we have the upper hand. We can get them to stop by this way, because they need us for the coins. So Abdul Malik got the idea, time to become completely independent from these people. We're going to mint our own coins. So they established a formal mint in the government, started minting their own coins, and then really intelligent move. And he said, every region that's paying taxes or paying zakat to us, we will not accept any coin but the Islamic coin. From now on, Roman coins and Persian coins are banned. The government will not accept the use of them anymore. So almost overnight, the new coins were put into circulation and the old coins were removed. So you have an official Islamic coin being used, and it's being spread out through the entire region, not just one place here or there. A very intelligent move actually. So these are some of the accomplishments that he had. Okay, so we're done with this slide. We're going to go with questions. You want to know more about Mukhtar? Okay, basically Mukhtar went to another person from the family of Ali. His name is Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya, who was living in Medina at that time. And he used him as a front, because he was a very respected person. He was like Zainul Abidin. So he used him as a front to say we need to get revenge and we need to establish power in Kufa, so that the rightful descendants of Ali and all of that can these are the rightful descendants heirs to the throne of Khalifa. So he used him as a front. What happened was, this guy was just really interested in power. So once he established the power, he basically ditched him and he said, I'm going to start my own movement. Mukhtar used Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya as a front, okay, who was living in Medina at that time. So that's pretty much the story of him. He survived because he was young, yes. They asked him to be the next Khalifa, yeah. Because of this, he could have been, had he accepted, he probably would have been, because he's directly from the family of the Prophet, peace be upon him. At that time, there was a very importance attached to that. So, who knows? He could have been, he might have been, but it didn't happen. Because they had nobody else. Even if he was young to be Khalifa, even if he grew up a little bit, let's say he was 12, 13 or something like that, it would have been sufficient for him. Okay, that could be another reason then, yes. I don't know his exact age. But something happened where he was saved, but he did not want to take leadership. He refused to take leadership. And he actually, in a sense, he kind of supported the Umayyads in another way. Once Medina was being invaded, he was on the Umayyad side. The reason why he was on the Umayyad side was because he was like the opinion of Hassan. You know what? If this power if they're already too powerful, let them rule and let's have unity instead. A very tough choice to make. What happened was, the Kaaba was already rectangular shape. When it was destroyed, the first time it got hit as well. Abdullah ibn Zubair reconstructed it in its proper original form. Okay? No, Abdullah ibn Zubair reconstructed in its rectangular form, in its rectangular form. Then what happened is that they tore it down and they reconstructed it in the other form, in the cube form again. And what happened was that they didn't know at that time that it was supposed to be in the rectangular form. Once they found out, they said, okay, we're going to bring it down again and we're going to rebuild it. Imam Malik told him that, you know what, you should not do this. Okay, this is not the right thing to do. Okay, because people are going to keep doing that again and again and again. So you don't want to do this. Okay, so that's a very good question. So at what point in time did the Shia group actually arise? See, it depends which Shia group we're talking about. See, the majority Shia group, right, is known as the 12ers, the Ithna Ashariya, who believe in 12 Imams. Technically, there's two ways of looking at it, right? One of them, they themselves claim that we already had this group at this point in time, right? The other way of looking at it, the way that the Ahl Sunnah, the Sunnis look at it, is that there was no Shia group at this time because the belief in 12 Imams didn't exist until the 12th Imam came. So no one believed that the 12th Imam would go in hiding until the 12th Imam actually went in hiding, which happened another 100 years later. Right? So this didn't actually exist at this point in time. So the Shia that we're referring to nowadays is different from the people at this point in time. The people at this point in time who are Shia, or what they mean by Shia at this time, is anyone who felt that the family of the Prophet ﷺ should have been the Khalifa. At this time, this is how Shias are defined. Later on, after the 12th Imam, mainstream Shias define themselves as that point, plus there's 12 Imams. And the 12th Imam is in hiding and he's going to return. At this point, no, there's about three. It's about three by now. Zayn al-Abidin, I mean, they don't consider Zayn al-Abidin. I forget the list of people that they have. Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, some of them put him in there, some of them don't put him in there. So they start splitting, Ja'far and all of that. So they go down the list. So they're like at 3 or 4 by now, but they're not even near 12. Alright, so then you have the Ismailis, who have like 7. Alright, so they believe that Ismail should have been number 7, and the other ones believe the other guy should have been number 7. So there's a dispute. So one believes in 7 Imams, one other group I think believes in 6 or 8, and the mainstream believe in 12. But none of these things have happened yet because we're not even at number 6 or 7 yet. They don't even exist yet. Well, that's the question. That's the question. Whether or not the 12th Imam was Imam al-Mahdi and he went into hiding or not. So that's another topic we'll cover, inshallah. We'll cover that next year in more detail. Since the death of the Prophet ﷺ has been reconstructed 3 times. Okay, 3 times. Who can make the decision? It's just going to be the authority. You mean Islamically who can make the decision? The thing is, the Kaaba has to be repaired if it's getting messed up. Whoever is going to repair it, they need to repair it. All right? So it's not about who has the authority to do it or who doesn't have the authority to do it. If it's damaged by a flood or damaged by a catapult or damaged by whatever, it needs to be reconstructed. So the Shia came a lot later. Because the whole concept of 12 Imams came a lot later. Until the 12th Imam goes in hiding, there is no full concept of 12 Imams. Of course, they will say we already knew he was going to go in hiding. But historically, that's not something that you find really documented very well. We said he might. He might. So this is kind of like reading into people's intentions. He might have yielded to Hassan only because, not because of the qualification, only because he had made an agreement with Hassan before. And he was willing to offer Hassan that after I die, I'm going to yield back to you. Hassan rejected it though. So he had no obligation to even yield back to him. But he remember he said, I'm willing to give you almost any condition. Even if you want this condition, he threw that out there. If you want that, I'm willing to do that as well. If you outlive me, I'll yield back to you. Right? So if he was willing at that time, he might have still been willing, but we don't know, and it's not binding on him. So we're just kind of trying to read the intention. He could have done something like that. It's true. It's true, but what happened was, the reason why he gets credit for it, putting the silk cloth, even though he burned the cloth, is because it became a tradition after him. So now the Kaaba is getting a special silk cloth all the time, whereas before it never had that. It had like a normal cloth, and it had different color. The Kaaba cloth used to be different colors, like rainbow colors and all different colors. It was not always black. So he's accredited, the black came later during the Abbasid times, but he's accredited with doing the silk part. So just making a nicer cover. That's true. Putting a cover is not really a big deal. These guys slaughtered people, absolutely. So his question is, did Muawiyah forget about not putting your family kind of into power? Right? That used to happen during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar and all that. So Abu Bakr, Umar, did you say Uthman? Or did you say Abu? You didn't say Uthman, because it happened in Uthman's time, right? So yeah, that's true. He had a different policy, right, than Abu Bakr and Umar. And he put a lot of his family members in power, and Uthman did something similar. Now the question is, during Uthman's time, did he intentionally put them in positions of power, or was it coming from their side that they're pressuring him, put me in power, and he's just a soft guy and he says, okay, fine, it's my family, let's go ahead and put them in power. So Uthman can have an excuse for being a little bit soft, right? So that was his issue. Muawiyah, you're right, he was stronger, but he went and he did put his family in the position of power. Whereas Umar used to be the opposite. So Umar used to be that my family, don't even come to me for any help or anything like that. We're not going to help you because we cannot set a bad precedent. So Umar was very precautious, and some people will say he was too precautious. That's what Muawiyah would say. But you're right. Had he followed the policy of Umar, it would have been a lot better. And that's why we're going to see next week, inshallah, there is one Umayyad who comes, who follows the policy of Umar, who happens to be from the family of Umar, and he changes things around completely. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's the hope, inshallah. Yes. It's a very good question. I've really tried to focus on that and try to incorporate all of that into the timeline and everything. It's proving to be more difficult than I imagined. Because most of the books of history, whenever you're trying to find something, you usually just get a lot of leadership. So what's happening is, when I'm trying to combine and fit it into the timeline, it's very hard to actually map it out exactly how it's going to be fitting into the timeline. So I'm going to do my best, because we are coming to all of this, stuff really happened after the first century of Islam. All of the, advancements, Abbasids and late Umayyads. So it happened during the Abbasid time. So we're going to talk about the science and technology and what happened in Spain and all of that stuff. So it's coming up. This is more like the first century. Once we get past the first century, I'm going to try to, mention the scholars and, scientific achievements and all that as much as possible. But, to reach the 20th century in 3 more classes is going to be very difficult. 4 classes or whatever. Huh? Part 3, yeah. Yeah, inshallah. You see, our stance with Yazid, we don't have to have any stance. Right? So the thing is, cursing him is an extreme. Because there's no need to go and start cursing this. We don't have a yearly celebration to curse the Pharaoh even, right? We don't like him as, he's cursed by Allah in the Quran, but we don't make it a habit or something like that. Let's go sit down and have a group where we go and curse, Fir'aun or curse Abu Lahab or something like that. We don't do that. Right? Well, we recite the surah, but outside of that, we don't do that, right? So cursing him is probably extreme. Praising him is probably another extreme. The best thing is just leave he's bad. He was not a good leader. That's quite clear. He was not a good leader, and he was Muslim though. There's no indication that he was not a Muslim. So if Allah chooses to forgive him, Allah chooses to forgive him. But we can learn that he's not a model worthy of emulation. He's not a person that we should look up to. He's not a person, and we should learn that people like this, they, other family members and stuff, they're going to get what's coming to them. So whatever is going to happen, Allah is going to deal with them with justice. That's the best position to take. Otherwise, we can go and search for every single leader. He's not a companion or something like that where we need to look into his detailed life or something. We can take any leader who was bad. Why do we have to comment on each and every single one? Right? So when looking at their faults, we can look at their faults to learn lessons from them. But to just look at his person and his character, what intrinsic status does he have that we have to focus on, making a judgment about his character? Who cares about his character? Leave him. Just be neutral. Yeah, just be neutral, and then learn from his mistakes. That's it. Learn from his mistakes. The Khawarij kept on, rebelling, and they basically kept on getting down. But they're still going. Yeah, he did. The Khawarij kept getting put down. But the thing is, with the Khawarij, okay, the Khawarij are extremists, right? And the Khawarij, they started out as being extremists, and they started out as, killing everyone else as well. But the thing is, the Khawarij started changing over time. So they were not the most hardcore pious people. They became more of a political movement. And the interesting thing is, their political movement was more of a democratic movement. It was democratic in the sense that no family should be, there should be no one particular family in charge or something like that. So from that perspective, if you zoom in, that's a really good thing that they had. But if you zoom out, they still had all these extremist tendencies. So it doesn't make up for, what they were doing. So you have to be careful when you're looking at the Khawarij. Everyone, you have to be careful when you look at them, because some people have some good in them, and then they have sometimes bad outweighs them. So you need to be very careful about judging them. Nobody knows exactly. So he was poisoned by somebody while living in Medina. So he retired in Medina. So the whole time he yielded, Muawiyah is ruling for 20 years. Hassan's in Medina, teaching and doing all of that, and he was poisoned. I mean, no one knows this. I didn't come across a specific story exactly. I don't think they know who did it. But if they do, if they know who did it, I mean, how it happened is there, but who did it exactly, we don't know. They say his wife poisoned him. Okay, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's real, or maybe that's why you have to be very careful about historical reports as well, because there's a lot of sectarian bias in historical reports. So it's very hard to filter. This is why this class takes me the most amount of time to prepare for, more than any other class I've ever done. So if the notes are coming a little bit late, you understand why. It's very difficult to go through these sources, unfortunately. Oh, Yazid, you're saying? No, he was the leader of the seaside. So he was a leader of the navy in that war, but not of the land. And the companions went through the land. So the question is, so you're saying that's the defense of him, basically, right? That's okay. That could be. So the thing is, that's why, I think Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said the best position to take on Yazid is the position of neutrality, neither praising him nor cursing him. So I think that's probably the most balanced position. I forget his exact wording, but it's not something that we should, make it. It's not a priority in our life, really, to be honest with you. So inshallah, we'll discuss a little bit more in our Thursday class when we talk about the companions and their status. See, we're going to talk about this. So what happened was, that's why the scholars, because of this first century, what happened? That's why the scholars who came later, when they were formulating rulings, when to rebel and when not to rebel, they took the most conservative position in the sense that you should not rebel against a leader unless it's as clear as daylight that this person is either doing something completely against Islam or he's left Islam. Until it's very, very clear. So they took the very, preventive measure when it came to rebellion. And one of the reasons that led them to that was because they saw everything that happened here. Taking all of this into consideration made them take this position, lean a little bit more towards that, and put extra, layers and boundaries, and say, rebellion can lead to this, and it's better to have unity. Even if you have somebody on top of you, right? As long as they're not stopping you from practicing Islam, right? If your Islam is literally being stopped completely, right? Forget progress and all of that, forget like expansion and progress and all that. If literally Islam is being prevented completely, and it's such a bad state of oppression where people cannot take it anymore, then rebellion is justified. But if it's a point where the person is just not making very good decisions, or spending money in the wrong way, it should have been spent here, but he spent it there, or something like that, there's difference. We should not rebel against them. That's why Muslim position has always been very conservative. Now, if we get to a crazy level where people are literally being oppressed and they literally can't even practice Islam, they're in utter poverty and living in something like that, then there's room for rebellion. So that's why a lot of people nowadays have confused the traditional position with the position of rebelling against leaders today. Like the leaders today, what's going on in these other regions and everything, they went and they took that precedence. They see, unless he declares himself to be open disbeliever, and some of them actually do acts of disbelief, but if they don't declare themselves to be, we shouldn't rebel against them. But really, they've misunderstood their position. So there is a room for rebellion, and there's a room for excusing some of these things for the sake of unity, and for the sake of not causing a problem in the society. Yeah. So what leads us to believe that Muawiyah was not doing it for power? Right? It's the same thing that leads us to believe that Ali was not doing it for power. Right? The thing is, when you analyze the life of a person, and you kind of tell what kind of person that was, you generally try to judge them by the type of person they are, because you can never know their real intention. Only Allah is going to know their real intention. So when you know the person and you look at some of the other circumstances, then you can tell. So the first thing is, you look at Muawiyah's position generally. The fact that he was a companion, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ actually entrusted him, it gives more credibility to his support. And the second thing is that if he wanted to simply just declare power, he would have done it already in Syria in the beginning. But he didn't do it until after the two negotiators failed to come at a compromise. Right? So if he wanted to grab power, if somebody really wanted to get power, he already had the Syrian army at his hands. He would have grasped power and declared himself the Khalifa before all of this happened, rather than waiting for all of this to take place. Because when we look at it in retrospect, say, oh, well, it worked out in his favor in terms of he got power. But he could have never known that. He could have not known that wanting to avenge the blood of Uthman was actually going to lead to him becoming the Khalifa. So that's number one, and that's two. And then the third point is that he was a relative of Uthman, and he was responsible for, he's the closest relative to Uthman, and there was nobody else. Right? So had he not been, and he been some random third party saying, yeah, we need to avenge it, and I'm going to take matters into my own hands, there could be a more, we can have a more accusation against him. So all of these kind of things, when we look at all the details and kind of piece them together, it's not something that we can directly question his motives. His motives generally they're not clear enough to suspect him of foul play. Where you're not supposed to judge people's intentions, but some other characters, you can kind of see their intentions from their actions. So Muawiyah is not one of them. So that's pretty much what leads it to it, inshallah. I will stop here, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.